Everybody, as promised, I'm here to cover the last point in the notes on the Unit 3 note outline that we didn't get a chance to cover in class, and then also go over worksheet number 15. So hopefully that answers any of the questions you may have had or parts of the worksheet that were unclear to you guys, and you'll be ready to dominate this test on Thursday and Friday. So let's get at it. First of all, the last point talks about capital versus labor, this balance that we have that businesses have to decide between capital and labor. So the first thing to know is, what do I mean when I say capital? In this case, capital refers to any machinery, technology, equipment, anything like that, a machine that you use to get a job done, to make something. So at a pizza restaurant, it would be the cash register, it would be the oven, mixer, if there's a mixer, anything like that, any kind of technology a company uses in order to make something. That's what capital is. So a business has to decide, where are we going to put our money? Are we going to invest in a lot of machinery and equipment and what we call capital, and then just hire a few workers to run the machines? Or are we going to hire a lot of workers and then just invest in a little bit of capital? In other words, those workers are going to be doing things more by hand. And so there's this balance between the two. Where do I put my money? Do I put my money in machines, or do I put my money in people? Generally speaking, there's a pretty easy rule here. As you look either in a particular industry or in a particular nation, when wages tend to be higher, you tend to see that businesses are going to invest in more capital and then hire fewer workers. So wherever wages are high, and there are certain industries where wages are high, or nations where wages are high, you tend to have more machines and fewer people. In situations where wages are low, it's the opposite. You tend to hire more people, and then they're doing things more by hand. You're not putting a lot of money and investment into the machinery and equipment to give them to do the job. So generally speaking, there's this, if you want to look at it as a continuum, you can see this balance here where wages are low. You're going to err on the labor side of things, and as wages go up, businesses are going to err on more of the capital side of things. Okay, so this, one of the arguments in regard to minimum wage, for example, is that we can raise wages and businesses still need workers. So of course businesses have to pay the higher wages. Well, not necessarily. Businesses cannot hire as many people. Maybe they put in self-serve kiosks instead of having a person there taking orders. Or they simply get rid of workers and they invest in more technology, robots, if you will, to do the job. So it doesn't necessarily follow that, well, businesses have to hire workers, therefore you can raise wages and it's not going to affect unemployment. Businesses can always switch to more capital, and that's kind of where that balance comes into play. So pretty simple concept, but I just wanted to clarify that before we move on. So let's look at worksheet number 15. The first 5 questions or so deal with whether something is or is not in GDP. So let's look at these. Number 1, General Mills buys corn from a farmer. They're going to take that corn, turn it into cereal. Not included in GDP. Okay, and the reason is, in this case, corn is a raw material. And remember, we do not include raw materials, only the final product, the final sale of all new finished products made in this country. Okay, number 2, on the other hand, an American consumer or a consumer buys corn from an American farmer, and they're going to eat that corn for dinner. That is in GDP because that's the final time. In other words, that corn is in its final form. It's not going to be made into something further. So that's the last sale of the corn in that case. Number 3, Hostess. That's an American-owned company, but they're making Twinkies in Mexico. Okay, not included. Remember, it has to be in our country. Okay, so not in GDP. Okay, it doesn't matter who owns it as long as it's made on our soil. Number 4, used cars sold through cars.com, not in GDP. Okay, we don't count resales, not included in that calculation. Number 5, a consumer buys a Sony TV. Now, Sony is a Japanese-owned company, but they buy it from a Best Buy, and the company is producing the TVs in a factory made in America. That is included in GDP because, again, like I said a second ago, it doesn't matter who makes it as long as it's made on our soil, and that TV is made on our soil, so it is going to be included. All right, let's talk about some unemployment questions. Sarah is a 20-year-old college student who wants to focus on her studies. She doesn't have a job, not looking for a job, not unemployed. Okay, so not in the unemployment rate because remember she's not a part of the labor force. Okay, to be a part of the labor force, it says unemployment, should say unemployed, but not part of the labor force because you have to have a job or be actively looking for a job to be in the labor force. If you're not in the labor force, you cannot be unemployed. Number 7, Jermaine's a 15-year-old that does not currently have a job. Let's just stop right there. The labor force consists of everybody 16 years old and older. Regardless of how many jobs Jermaine has applied for, he is not unemployed because he's not at least 16. So therefore, again, he's not in the labor force, just like with Sarah up there, and so therefore not unemployed. You have to be in the labor force, 16 or older, and be actively looking for work to be unemployed. All right, types of unemployment and calculating. So number 8, the type of unemployment when there's a mismatch between worker skills and jobs available, that's structural. Okay, and that's just kind of a term you need to know, structural unemployment mismatch. So a country's got 94 people that have a job, 6 people that do not have a job, but are looking. Okay, so 6 people who are unemployed. So our total labor force is 100. If you remember when we talked about unemployment, we do the number of people unemployed divided by the labor force. Okay, so the number unemployed divided by labor force. So in this case, there are 6 people unemployed. Our labor force is 100 because you have the 94 people that already have a job, the 6 people who want a job. Those are included in our labor force. So our labor force is 94 plus 6, so that's 100. So that would be 0.06, if I'm being accurate here. Okay, or 6%. Okay, so you just simplify it and say we have a 6% unemployment rate. Okay, so make sure you know that formula, number of unemployed divided by the labor force. The type of unemployment when we're in a recession that is cyclical. Remember, the easy way of remembering that is when the economy is sick. So I always remember it that way. And then, of course, the last one, when people are either between jobs or looking for their first job, that is frictional. Okay, so remember, we got 3 types. We have structural, cyclical, frictional. The 2 types that are considered to be natural are frictional and structural. Okay, so if we only have frictional and structural, we are considered to be at full employment. Okay, we are never going to have a 0% unemployment rate. We're always going to have some people between jobs. We'll always have some degree of mismatch between jobs and skills. Those are considered natural. And if that's all we have full employment. When we have cyclical, that's when we officially are in a recession and we are considered to be not at full employment. Okay? Speaking of full employment, so this line here, remember this yellow line that we talked about? That's what we consider to be our full employment output. So again, if we only had frictional and structural, that's what we would have. So let's look at it. Right now, this is where we should be. Okay, in other words, that's how much the economy should be producing, but notice that our economy is producing at Y1. While our economy is producing less than it should be, therefore we are in recession. Okay, so this graph depicts an economy in recession because where we are producing at Y1 is less than where we should be producing at full employment output. All right, number 11, we should know this. What 2 things determine wage? Supply and demand. The supply for labor and the demand for labor. Okay. Who's going to make more money on average? Average being a key word here. Those that take the fixed guarantee, your hourly wage workers, your salary workers, or those that take the variable chance, such as the business owners. And of course, the answer is the variable chance. Typically, business owners make more than the workers when they are successful because that's the nature of risk and reward. Low risk, low reward. Fixed guarantees are low risk, low reward. High risk, high reward, like taking a chance. All right, demand for labor. This is important. Number 13, based on what 2 items? Based on output. In other words, how much a worker can produce. If you remember the worksheet, we talked about pizzas and computers and things like that. So how many pizzas can you make? That's your output. times the price of the output. Okay, now if you multiply those two things together, you get how much, you essentially get how much money is added to a company by hiring a worker. If either of these two numbers increase, the value of the worker increases. In other words, if a worker can make more things, or if the value of what they're making increases, that worker is now more valuable to you. If either of these things decrease, if a worker makes fewer things for some reason, or the output becomes less valuable, the workers are less valuable as well. Okay, so that's important. Number 14, which job is going to pay higher wages? A job anyone can do or one that requires special skills? Well, of course, the special skills, because the supply of labor is going to be a lot lower. Okay, anytime you have a low supply, you have a higher price, in this case, the price of labor. From the perspective of the economy, what important function do wages serve? They help us allocate workers, and this resources, in this case workers. So they help us allocate workers. That's a fancy way of saying they help us know which industries need more workers, which industries need fewer workers, which industries are in greater demand or lesser demand, and so we need more workers going here and fewer going here, and so it helps us to allocate our workers and figure out where to go. Number 16, which is more accurately accurate statistically, the idea that people are moving up and down all the time. Okay, so people move up and down the socioeconomic ladder. Again, most people are economically mobile throughout their life. Number 17, which statement is most true in the job market? Best answer here is number 4. Okay, we know that the good kind of we know discrimination happens, so number 1 is not true. Sometimes it's the good kind, sometimes it's the bad kind. It can be really hard to figure out which one is which, though. Is someone given a job simply because they were more qualified and they've earned it, or was someone given a job because of a particular preference that the owner has for that type of person? That can be hard to know without knowing intent and motives and everything else. We can't just assume it's one or the other. We don't know why, oftentimes. And lastly, number 18, we just covered this. As wages increase, businesses are more likely to invest in more capital. Okay, in other words, more machinery and equipment, and hire those fewer workers. And that's what we just covered a second ago. All right, guys, so those are the answers. Hopefully that makes more sense as I explained it. But as always, if you have any questions, guys, let me know. And we plan on seeing you back here on Thursday to take part 1 of the test. Guys, enjoy your day off.